Hello, Steve. How you doing? Mm-hmm. And then Matthew, we're waiting for the wheels to jump on. But while everybody's jumping on, we're going to turn to Matthew chapter 5. I want to read the entire chapter of Matthew chapter 5. Well, actually, verses 3 through 48. That's what I want to do. Read 3 through 48. And so I'm going to need, let's say, 4 volunteers who will read. So who will read 3 through 14? Who will read 3 through 14?
I'll do that.
Chapter 5, verse 3 through. Thank you. And then let's do, did I say 3 through 14?
You did.
Chase,
Yes.
would you, is your offer still good if you do 3 through 16?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And then let's say 17 through 30. Who'd want to do 17 through 30? Oh, okay, Samuel. I see that hand. And then 31 through 48. Going once.
I got that.
Somebody's got to do it. All right. Thank you, Steve.
You got it.
You doing well tonight, Steve? It's good to see you.
Outstanding.
Good, good. Let's go ahead and just start reading, and Chase 3 through whatever number I told you, and then Samuel, then Steve.
All right. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You're the light of the world. The city set on the hillside cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven.
Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell.
It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone sue you and take off your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall live as you hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Awesome. Thank you guys for reading that. So just a couple of things. Oftentimes I hear people say when they're trying to, I don't know, justify themselves. I think one of the more common justifications is they will inform you that, well, I'm a really good person. Anybody heard those statements from people before? I'm a good person. And I don't know, I was just thinking about that, thinking, you know, we tend to set the bar pretty low. When we say we're a good person, we often set the standard pretty low. In other words, we're saying, I'm not a murderer, you know, or I'm not a, you know, I haven't, you know, killed anybody or done something like that. It's like, well, that's a pretty low bar. If the bar is I haven't murdered anybody, then yeah, just about all of us can get over that one. Most people can get over that one. So people tend to judge themselves by a very, very low standard. In fact, a low bar is easy to clear. So tonight we're going to look at Jesus's bar, if you will, and we need to work our way through some of these passages. Well, we're going to just work our way through the murder one, but I do want to look at them as a whole. But before we get to them, looking at them as a whole, I also want us to turn to Genesis chapter 4. Let's go to Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 5. And listen to this passage of text, and then I want to kind of reflect on it a little bit. It says, now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was angry and his face fell. So I want to just pause for a moment and think about this one. Let's think, what is God's response to Cain's offering? Not a trick question, right there in the text.
He was very angry.
God was angry at Cain's offering?
Correct.
Okay. So where do you see that he was angry with Cain's offering?
Oh, sorry. It says Cain was very angry.
Okay.
Sorry. Cain, he had no regard for it.
Okay. Well then, Kelsey, what was Cain's response?
He was very angry.
Thank you. So,
Sorry. Thank you.
yeah, let me ask you just a couple quick things then. In what way do you see God's concern for Cain in this? We didn't go a whole lot. And let me go a little further. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So how is that? How do we see God express his concern for Cain in this issue?
I think he's giving him a chance to look at his reaction and have both choices. Almost like you can react this way or you can see the silver lining and act the other way. And he gives him
Okay.
the warning. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Awesome.
But
And then
Joseph,
how about
Joseph was
this?
saying
Go
that
ahead.
God wants to warn him.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So here we see God having concern for Cain by warning him, giving him some instruction. And so do we learn something about God from this? And if so, what?
It looks like he tells us that we have the ability to rule over our sin. In that very last verse, you must rule
Okay,
over
yeah.
it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, its desire is contrary to you. What were you saying, Joseph?
You have a choice and you don't have to do sin.
Okay, yeah. And sin desires to have you, but you must rule over it. It's a very interesting statement. So how is sin described in this passage?
It awaits at the door.
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, so it's, yeah. If you do well, so it says, yeah, so Cain was angry. Why are you angry? Why is your face fallen? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. It's this kind of predator, this lion, almost some sort of predator lying in wait and waiting for you.
It's almost personified.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So sin is personified. Good point. And it's crouching at the door and its desire is contrary to you. What are Cain's options?
He's told he has to rule over it. He's got to make the right decision about it.
Okay. Right. So he has an option to rule over it or not. Okay. It seems like that's going on there. Good. I kind of want to use that, lay some foundation. I want to talk a little bit about sin, how God deals how God responds to those who are being tempted. But I also want to go way forward in your Bible to James chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. And then we'll get into our text, I swear.
Do not swear by heaven or earth. To yes be yes,
I was
and no be
wondering-
no. Didn't we just cover this, John? Come on. We could.
I was kind of waiting for that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
who
You
was gonna do-
softball, pal. Served it up on a platter. I hit it over the park. It was either me or Kelsey.
did.
She was crouching at the door waiting to hit it
Somebody
over
had,
the park
somebody
too.
was, hey, that's right. So what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? And I'm just going to end there real briefly. So what is the source of anger?
Desire.
I'm sorry?
Desire.
Okay, then is all desire sin?
No.
I desire a new job. I desire, okay, so let's expand, let's go with that. It's desire, but it's not just any desire.
So
do not have what we don't have.
Yeah, so there seems to be something that we desire something but don't have it, don't get it. So I desire a new job, but I'm not getting hired. And so now all of a sudden I get mad at whatever. So it's some sort of unfulfilled or unmet desire.
right.
Yeah, passion, that's a great one. So passions that are at war, you desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot attain, so you fight and quarrel. And so James talks about this, the source of anger is something that kind of restricts my or hinders me getting what I want. So with that, let's talk a little bit about our Matthew passage. We're entering a new section here, and we're going to see 6 contrasts, and I think these 6 contrasts reveal the heart of God. But I find it interesting because in Matthew 5:17, Jesus says, I'm not going to destroy the law, but fulfill it. And then he serves up law. Well, actually says, I didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And then he says, your righteousness must exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. And I think here now he is going to describe a righteousness that exceeds the scribes and Pharisees. Okay, so that's the general idea. And so we're told to be, so anyways, we can just go with that. So 6 contrasts, he's going to use the Mosaic law to show something about the righteousness that is to be in kingdom citizens, or some sort of righteousness that should indwell kingdom citizens. So our first one here deals with murder. Exodus 20:13 says, you shall not murder. So why does Jesus equate murder? Okay, so what does Jesus equate with murder in this text? What does Jesus equate with murder?
Fighting?
Anger.
Fighting? Anger. Okay, yeah, anger. And so right off the bat, what are we going to learn about God's standard of holiness? Just from that one simple statement, what do we learn about God's standard of holiness or righteousness, perhaps?
His bar is a lot higher than ours.
Okay, yeah, so we set the bar. Yeah, his bar is much different. What is the bar?
I think a lot of these comparisons that Yeshua uses are really dealing with the heart, right? You know, just getting out of performance and act and law and starting to look at what's going on with the motive behind the person or the heart at the heart level.
Right. So not only is the act wrong, but there's something else that is. So the Pharisees are probably hearing Jesus say, "You shall not murder," and they're probably going, "Right on. I'm doing well. I'm there. Never killed a person in my life. I'm awesome." And then he says, "Now, however, if you're angry with your brother, you've committed murder in your heart." Now he's just indicted probably everybody who's listening to him. At this point, everybody has been indicted for their sin. So let me ask you, I think it was last week, one of the weeks we talked about, is there greater and lesser sin? And I don't know how we may have answered that. I think we said, anyways, is there greater and lesser sin? Are some sins greater than others?
All sins are the same.
All sins are the same. Why do you say that?
Whether it's like killing someone or just talking mean to them.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so
Yeah, both of those will bring God's anger. What were you going to say, Scott?
no, that's okay. I was just saying there are ones that are greater and lesser in our view, but in God's view, they're all we call it you're trespassing the law in either word or, I guess, thought.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a trick question because I think the answer is yes and no. On the one hand, no, there aren't. Not like Scott said. In God's view, I mean, they all will require the death of Christ to be forgiven. So whether it is I'm angry at my brother or I actually take somebody's life, both sins require that Christ die for them. On the other hand, as a pastor, I would much rather have somebody come into my office and say, "I'm angry with my brother," than come into my office and say, "I just killed my brother." It's just much rather deal with anger than with murder. So in that sense, there are some differences, but how does anger and insults relate to murder? Maybe let's talk about that. How does anger and insults relate to murder? That seems like a pretty big leap.
Well, I think you see in Genesis, like you showed us, where he started off with anger and then it escalated to murder.
Sin doesn't stay dormant. And
Right, yeah.
then the anger is the seed that blossoms into murder.
Okay. Yeah, and we saw that in James. Why do you murder? Why do you kill? You lust and you do not have. And like Kelsey said, you know, the anger in Cain became murder. And so so all of these things, both of these things then are our sins, and they separate us from Christ and require forgiveness. And so remember, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. I mentioned a while back, I really think that's the thesis statement for the sermon. You can always disagree with that, but I think that's the thesis statement because really, I think the rest of the Sermon on the Mount is going to be dealing with that. What is the righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees? And so that's where I think we're going to be going. Let's look at Matthew chapter 12, verses, it's in your notes there, 34 through 37. If I can get somebody to read those verses, 12, 34 through 37.
I can read those, John.
Thank you.
Matthew chapter 12, verse 34. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of your heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
Great. And then Matthew 15, 16 through 20 goes like this. And he said, this is Jesus, are you still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles the person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone. And so when we're reading these passages, Jesus is giving us an idea of where sin originates. So if you had to ask the question or answer the question, where does sin originate? How would you respond?
The heart.
Yeah. And so really one of the things that the whole thing with the whole new covenant isn't to make us better people, but to make us new people with a new heart. And that's a massive transformation. So, in your notes, the question is it easier for you to control your actions or your thoughts and emotions? Anybody dare to answer that?
Another trick
Looks like
question.
No.
It would seem like it would be easier to control your actions based on what we see with, even the scribes and the Pharisees who came and put on a good show, but yet had a lot of those same underlying things going on in their hearts.
Yeah.
So.
And for me, I feel like since I work with such little children, I can see them not being able to control their thoughts and actions, but they can, they lash out before they process. And so I feel like it's almost like a learned behavior.
Right.
We have to figure out how to train ourselves that way.
Yeah, I know a lot of people really, very controlled and kind and nice, but they will tell you they are angry individuals. We had Simone and I both had a seminary professor, and he's a real mild man, pretty humble, probably the smartest guy he ever met, very humble, very meek. And he would tell you that he has wrestled all of his life with just an terrible anger. And you would never see that. He controls it really, really well. He's a super nice guy. Yep, but he struggles.
Okay, Joseph had a thought.
I think
Yeah.
you have to control your thoughts to control your actions, because you have to think to act.
Yeah. I see what you wrote here in the chat. It starts with a thought. I think that's really good. So one of the really big issues, I think, when we're going through these this list of 6 things that Jesus is going to introduce us to, one of the things that we can't ignore is the formula that he uses. you've heard it said, but I say to you. He uses that in all 6. And you've heard it said, but I say to you. What claims, if any, is Jesus making with that statement?
Equal to the law and the prophets, equal to the word of God.
Okay, why do you say that?
Because that's where they've heard it. They've heard it from the law and the prophets. You've heard it said. That was God's law. You shall not murder. And then Jesus says so.
I think he's making a very bold statement of being above the law and taking the law to a totally different level, which they had never experienced before. And that's what you just shared, which is the level of the heart.
Yeah, so who can do that?
God.
Yeah, so who said thou shalt not murder?
Yeah, that was God.
Yeah, that was God. God said thou shalt not murder. And Jesus comes along, but I say to you.
Pretty bold.
That's a really bold claim. All right. So God says, don't murder. Let me tell you what I say. How would you respond to any teacher today who would use that formula?
You better have some pretty good evidence that you are who you say you are, because that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of like what.
Yeah. I think you froze on us. Did you? No, I think Steve froze on us. Did everybody else freeze?
Can you hear me?
Steve, no, you froze on us. So go again.
So I think I was sharing that he was making a statement that, basically he is God and he supersedes
Yeah.
what good, when anybody says, you have heard it said, and then he quotes the law and then he says, but I say to you, he's basically saying, let me give you something else. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying on Sunday, the response is like, really, pal, who do you think you are?
Right. Good point. Yeah. So if somebody were to say that, I don't think there's anybody who can, throughout history, who can say that. But he's also now we learned something about who Christ is, but then we also learn that I think what he's doing is he's taking us back to the original intent of the law. The law is more than just good behavior. A lot of times legalistic systems are nice because we can meet them. But if you just say, well, don't murder and don't take oaths and, these types of things, it's like, well, I can probably do that. But when you get down to the hard issues, those are a little more challenging. So Jesus, I think he's taking everybody, especially remember, your righteousness needs to surpass that of the scribes and the Pharisees. And he's saying, here's what it takes if your righteousness is to exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, here's where we're going. So I guess maybe just a brief summary. I can, quote, not murder, but to not anger is going to require something more than self-control. Does that make sense? I can, quote, not murder, but if I'm going to not anger, that's going to require something more than self-control. It's going to require a transformed heart. It's going to require something completely different. It's going to require like God dwelling in me. Way more than just me not lashing out at you. So now Christ is now inviting us to participate in in his kingdom, and he's relating, this is the character of kingdom citizens. I've invited you to be part of the kingdom. Here is the character of kingdom citizens. So it would be easy to say kingdom citizens shouldn't kill each other, but that's a really low standard. It's a whole different standard to say, I don't want you angry with one another. That's a whole different deal. And so after he makes this statement, you've heard it said, do not murder, but whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable to hell. So if you, now in verses 23 through 26, so if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you're going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you've paid the last penny. So now he moves on to, I think, the importance of reconciliation. And to what does he compare? Maybe that's not the right word. So he seems to set, for his illustration, he uses the act of worship. And it almost seems, tell me what you think about this, that he is saying that reconciliation is more important than worship. Do you think that's, am I stating that right? Or how would you read those last those verses?
I don't, John.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
Hey.
John. It doesn't appear to me he's saying that at all, but what he's saying is that it can hinder. So it could be a stumbling block. It could be in the way, and so to clear that path, to make there less obstacles in your worship, to make sure your heart is in the right place with your brothers and sisters and you're in right standing.
Okay. Good point. I like that.
Can I say one more thing?
You can say more than one more thing, but sure.
Well, one of the things I took some notes, and one of the things that always hits me is that it really seems like what he's continuing to do through this is continue to point out that it's a hard issue, right? I think that's pretty obvious to all of us probably, and believe at the time the Jewish leaders were believing that if they kept the law, that's what saved them. And so it just seems to be reiterating and trying to make them understand, not that there's a new standard, but the standard was a lot higher than what they thought it was.
Yeah, I like that point that this is not a new standard. I think I'm glad you brought that up. This is not a new standard. This has always been the standard. They lowered the bar. The bar got lowered. So one passage of text that I found helpful on this, and it's in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 10 through 16. Isaiah 1, I guess that's on the back, 1:10 through 16. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the teaching of our God, you people of Gomorrah. What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I have had enough of burnt offerings and of rams, the fat of well-fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or lambs or of goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required of you this trampling of my courts? Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity and the solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I'm weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from before your eyes. And so let's just go through this and let's, as a group, list the elements of worship that God has actually ordained. What elements of worship in these verses are elements that God has actually ordained?
They talk about the burnt offerings and the feasts.
Yeah, so I've had burnt offerings of rams, well-fed beasts, blood of bulls and lambs and goats. Okay, yeah. Did God ordain those as part of worship?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
All right.
Sabbath.
What else?
Sabbath too.
Okay, Sabbath.
He mentions incense.
Okay, yeah, incense, that would be a good one. Yep.
I'm not sure if the
What'd you
new
say,
moon
Simone?
festivals and the feasts were given by God, or if those were later celebrations of things that happened along the way. I can't remember.
Yeah, appointed feast.
Okay.
Good one.
Yeah, there were appointed feasts and there were definite feast days and some of them were on new moons. What did you say, Simone? You remember? Okay, all right, good. Making prayers. So God lists all of these elements of worship that it is he who, and he ordained them. Why does he now despise them?
Because their behavior doesn't match their offerings. It's insincere or faulty because their behavior, they're not changing it. They're just thinking it's justifying whatever they want to do.
Right, so they're going through the motions. They're doing all of the stuff that God said, but they are, as you go through much of the book of Isaiah, especially this this first chapter, you know, you're going through the motions, you're doing all these things, but you're abusing and oppressing your brother and you're defiling your neighbor and you are taking and you are killing. It's like, listen, your worship is abhorrent to me. You're doing all the right things, but you're idolaters. Oftentimes they would be idolaters all through the week, and they would worship all the false gods. And then on the Sabbath day, they'd get together and observe the Sabbath, and they would observe it meticulously, and then go back to their idols. And God's like going, okay, I've had enough of this.
It kind of reminds me of in Proverbs, the adulterous woman who is like, hey, look, I've done my my sacrifices, I've done my feast, so come,
Right.
let's have our fill of love
Yeah.
until morning. It's like, no, I think you missed the point there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. And so basically this is just, we'd call this hypocritical worship. And this is, I think, a good parallel to what Jesus is addressing. Listen, I'm not saying that your worship is, you're just going through the motions, but you hate your brother. And John says, how can you hate your brother and say you love God? You know, you say you love God whom you've never seen, but then you hate your brother whom you have seen. These two things don't add up. And I think we see that in 1 John 3:11 through 18. Yeah, here it says, for this is the message that you've heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. We should not be like Cain, who was from the evil one and murdered his brother. Why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers. Whoever does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. I think John there is picking up a lot from this Sermon on the Mount. So think about how extreme Jesus's message is. If you're about to make an offering, so think about that. You've come before the Lord, you've got your offering in your hand, and you're getting ready to offer this sacrifice. And there you remember, and I like what he says, it says, there you remember that your brother has something against you. I think that's interesting. It's not that I have something against my brother. I know my brother has something against me. What are you supposed to do? Go and leave your offering and go and be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. That's pretty radical statement, you know. Get your heart right. I don't.
I never saw that before, John.
Yeah,
I've seen,
yeah, that's.
I've seen that. I've seen that a lot
Places
because
where
I
it
had.
says you're supposed to go. Go ahead.
I've had a lot of trouble with my older brother in the past. He's passed now, but this is one of the verses that I've
Yeah.
always, the Lord's always spoke to me about, like in my going, you know, you need to really work to make this as right as possibly whatever's within me to be able to continue the relationship. And,
Right.
but all the times I've looked at that, I always read the other direction. That if I have something, I'm checking
Yeah,
my
yeah.
heart. If I have something with him, I need to get rid of it, and that's now, it's like, if I know I'm responsible, not just for that, but I'm responsible to reach out and help him if he's got a problem with me.
It's a very tall order.
Yeah,
that
there are
he's
other
asking.
places that. Yeah. The huge order. And Dave, there are places where it goes the other direction, but this one here I think is rather unique, that it's that the direction it's going. And like Steve said, it's a tall order. I don't know, maybe it would be something along the lines, I'm trying to think of a modern day parallel, since we don't offer sacrifices, but perhaps
I got one for you.
what's, okay,
Yeah, it's very simple.
What is
It happened to me today. I was reading this passage. Was it today? Maybe it was yesterday. Yesterday. I was reading this passage, and you know, my brother, physical brother, lives in Peoria, and he is, you know, claims to have a relationship with Christ. Yet he is politically aligned with the Democratic Party, and he has ideologies that don't line up with what I read in the Bible as far as, you know, his viewpoints and things. His tolerance is, you know, how he lives his life overall. And during the last quarter, I basically was sending him stuff that was really ticking him off. And, you know, and he said, stop. And I did. And so I ended up, I read this morning, and I started, or yesterday, and I started thinking, okay, is he okay with me? You know,
Yeah.
and he hasn't reached out. He's been pulling back in his relationship with me. And so I called him, and, you know, honestly, I didn't ask him the question, are we okay since the political stuff? I wanted to, but I didn't open it up because I felt like it's more of a sit down and have a conversation than a phone call thing. And that's just been lacking. And a lot of that's been COVID. He's been isolating himself. So, but I felt the Holy Spirit was prompting me to engage it. And when we do that, we become very vulnerable to the other person. It's a very scary thing because you're exposing your heart to somebody without knowing what they're going to do with it. If they're going to receive it, or, you know, they're going to just trash it. And I actually did that with somebody else, and he trashed it. I brought up something from the past, and his response to me was, "What's the point? Why are you bringing this up? What's the point?" And I'm like, "I want to be reconciled, bro." And he was not wanting to have anything to do with reconciliation. So
I'm sorry about that. I hope things that breach with your brother are resolved, and that the Lord would be merciful in that.
no, I think my
So thank
brother's
you for
okay.
sharing.
It's my brother, I think, and I are okay. I think it's the other guy, and he's here locally in Payson, and that's what's really a
Yeah, I pray
challenge.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking perhaps maybe the two of the more solemn events that we do are probably maybe like baptism or a wedding. And can you imagine you're getting ready to marry the love of your life, and then you remember, wait a second, my brother has something against me. Let's just cancel the wedding for just a moment, drop everything, everything's on hold. We're going to go and get this thing taken care of. And when I do, I'll come back and we'll do all the vows. I mean, that seems like almost pretty extreme, but that's kind of what Jesus is saying here. I mean, it's that solemn of an event. I'm offering a sacrifice, and now I'm going to say, wait a second, let's stop. Let me go take care of something else, and I'll come back and do this. It's a pretty, earlier, Steve, you said this is a pretty, I don't know, a high bar, or it's a big deal,
I wonder.
Yeah,
whether
communion, baptism, you're getting ready to get. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just thinking, wonder whether this could be Jesus and a lot of writers in the Bible use hyperbole. I wonder if this,
Yes.
not necessarily, but like he might be overstating to get his point across.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I could probably get there. He's saying this is how high the bar is. Yeah, I don't know that, especially when we get into some of the other, you've heard it said, but I say to you, there will definitely be hyperbole in there. All right, like gouge out your eye. So yes, it's quite possible. So the main point, I think, here, and it's easy when we start going through some of these things, is to get bogged down into the minutia, and I'm probably guilty of that. But I think the point here is that there is an urgency in reconciling. And so reconcile while you have an opportunity, reconcile while you have a say in the outcome. I think that's the general idea is it's easy to get really, here's the crazy thing. You can get really legalistic about these next 6 things, all right? But Jesus just is saying, I didn't come to give you a reason to be more legalistic. You're already legalistic. I'm not giving you more opportunity to do what you're already doing. I'm trying to free you from that. So we do need to be careful when we go through some of these, that we just don't make them new laws that replace old laws. All right. So, but I think the general idea here is that there is this reconcile, there's an urgency. There is something that your heart needs to be right in worship. Because out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and it's from within that we are defiled. So.
Not to have to give reasons for what Jesus said, but I've heard a number of people that I've talked to have said, you know, I never really reconciled with my dad. A lot of times it's dad or my brother, and he's dead.
Mhm.
He got in a car accident, and
Yeah.
I never had a chance to tell him how much
Yeah.
I cared about him. And I mean, not to have a reason for what Jesus is saying, but that is one that strikes me as a really good reason to reconcile while you can.
Okay, yeah. Right, yeah, so there's an urgency in this. So I think one of the things, I'm going to kind of draw this to a close, one of the things Jesus is trying to do, I think here, is to strip away self-righteousness. All right, the issue is your righteousness needs to exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, that I didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. Here, he is stripping away any self-righteousness, because let's face it, even the best people are sinners. Even the greatest Pharisee and the most righteous scribe was sinful. And it's easy for us to exult in our, quote, righteousness. And he's stripping that away. And ultimately, we're going to become dependent not on ourselves for this righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees. We're going to see, I don't got it. I don't know how to not be angry. All right. I'm going to need something. And then I'm going to need some sort of forgiveness, more than a bull or a lamb or a goat, to take care of the times when I do get angry and lash out. And so I don't think Jesus is giving us a new, harsher law. That's not the point. Well, the law said don't murder, but Jesus is just going to make it even harder for us. I think he's trying to expose that we can be self-righteous, and we need to find some righteousness outside of ourselves. Well, I probably got a bunch of other stuff, but let's go ahead. And any other comments or thoughts on that? Anything you want to add, take away? All right, then I'm going to stop recording, and we'll take some prayer requests. And